I stood in the bridal suite of the Westchester Country Club, my white dress hanging perfectly from the antique hanger, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my best friend Karen, just a Google Drive link and 3 words: "Open this now." My hands were shaking as I clicked. The file opened. It was a bank statement, Brandon's bank statement, an account I'd never seen before, transactions dating back 4 years. $50,000 a month going to someone named M. Sinclair, with memos that said things like rent, groceries, school supplies. I felt the room tilt. I had exactly 90 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. Let me back up, because you need to understand how good things were before they fell apart. I'm Ashley, 32 years old, and until about 5 minutes ago, I was the luckiest woman alive. Brandon and I had met at Northwestern. He was pre-law, I was studying finance, and we spent the first year pretending we weren't obsessed with each other. By second year, we stopped pretending. By graduation, we were inseparable. The last 5 years had been like living in a catalog photo. Brandon made partner at his firm by 30. I built up a portfolio of real estate investments that actually paid off. We bought the house in Scarsdale, 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, perfect for the golden retrievers we didn't have yet, but talked about constantly. Our wedding was booked, our life was planned, our credit score was exceptional. My mom had spent the entire last month in absolute heaven. She'd taken 2 weeks off work from her job as a hospital administrator just to be available for final fittings and seating chart revisions. My dad had given the longest, most embarrassing toast at the rehearsal dinner last night, complete with stories about me as a kid that I'd specifically asked him not to tell. My brother flew in from Seattle with his new girlfriend, and we all stayed at the Four Seasons, which Brandon's parents insisted on paying for because this is what we do for family. Everything was perfect. That's what made it so much worse. Brandon had been distant for about 6 months. Nothing dramatic. He wasn't staying out late or anything like that. It was subtler. He'd be on his phone more, typing quickly and then locking the screen when I walked in. He'd take calls in his office with the door closed. He started saying he had to go into the firm on Saturday mornings for client meetings that somehow never seemed to materialize into billable hours or promotions or anything concrete. I mentioned it to my therapist, Dr. Reeves, about 3 months ago. She said it was probably just pre-wedding jitters. Men get nervous too, she'd said. He's probably just processing the magnitude of the commitment. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the distance kept growing. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found a second phone, an older iPhone with a cracked screen, in the pocket of his winter coat. When I held it, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I didn't open it. I couldn't. What if I found something? What if I didn't? I put it back exactly where it was. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that good relationships are built on trust. Karen had been watching me spiral. She'd noticed the way I kept checking my phone, the way I'd gone quiet at our final girls' night before the wedding. She knew me well enough to know something was wrong, but she was giving me space to figure it out myself. Until this morning. Apparently, while Brandon was in the shower before heading to the church, Karen had sent him a text from my phone asking him to meet me at a coffee shop near the venue, some story about needing to talk before the ceremony. When he showed up, she'd recorded him. Not the whole thing, just enough. Just him sitting down across from a woman who wasn't me. The woman was older, maybe 45, with dark hair and a tired expression. Just enough of Karen's phone recording to catch him holding the woman's hand across the table and saying something that made her cry. Karen had done what I was apparently incapable of doing. She'd found the truth. My phone started ringing. It was Brandon. Of course it was Brandon. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again, and again. Finally, a text. "Where are you? What's going on? My mom is freaking out. We're supposed to start in an hour." I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was perfect. My makeup was flawless. The dress. God, the dress had cost $5,000 and fit like it was made by angels. I looked like a bride. I looked happy. I called the reception hall manager, Derek, the guy who'd been coordinating everything for the past 8 months. "Derek," I said, and my voice sounded like it was coming from very far away, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. In about 45 minutes, I'm going to nod at you from the back of the church. When I do that, I need you to stand up and interrupt the ceremony. I need you to say that there's been a development, something important that everyone needs to hear. Can you do that for me?" There was a long pause. "Ashley, what the hell is going on?" "Just promise me you'll do it, Derek, please," he promised. I pulled up the bank statement again and made a note of the account number, the transaction dates, everything. I took screenshots. I sent them to my email, my cloud storage, my lawyer's email. I was methodical about it. This is what you do when you're trained in finance and your entire world is collapsing. You document everything. Then I put on my wedding dress, because if I was going to blow up my life in front of 250 of my closest friends and family members, I might as well look incredible while doing it. The car ride to the church felt like a funeral procession. My dad kept asking if I was okay, if I was nervous, if I needed to talk about anything. I told him I was fine. I was always fine. That was my thing, being fine, being together, being the girl who had it all figured out. We pulled up to Westchester Presbyterian at 3:47 p.m. The church was stunning. White roses everywhere. The strings quartet was warming up. I could see people arriving, Brandon's colleagues, my college friends, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone coming to watch me marry a man who had apparently been supporting another woman for the last 4 years. I stood at the back of the church, arm linked through my father's, listening to the organist start the processional. My mom was already in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she wouldn't need. Not yet, anyway. I took a breath. My legs felt like they were made of water, but I started walking down the aisle. Brandon stood at the altar in his Tom Ford tuxedo, looking nervous and beautiful and like a stranger. His best man, his brother Derek, stood beside him. Our officiant, Father Mitchell, was smiling. Everyone turned to look at me. Everyone was smiling. I made it about halfway down the aisle. Brandon's eyes locked on mine, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear, maybe. Recognition. Like he knew, somehow, that everything was about to change. I nodded at Derek in the back of the church. Derek stood up, and everything started to fall apart. Derek stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor loud enough that the organist stopped playing. Every head in the church turned toward the back. "Father Mitchell," Derek said, his voice steady and clear. "I'm sorry, but we need to pause this ceremony. There's something everyone needs to know." The room went absolutely silent. You could hear the faint sound of traffic outside, the distant hum of the air conditioning. Brandon's face went white, not pale, but genuinely white, like all the blood had drained out of it in about 2 seconds. "What the hell is going on?" Brandon's father, Robert, stood up from the front row. He was a corporate attorney, used to controlling situations. This was not something he could control. I pulled out my phone and walked forward, still in my wedding dress, still looking like the perfect bride, except now my eyes were dry and cold as ice. I walked right up to the altar and handed my phone to Father Mitchell. "Show them the bank statement," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. I thought I would fall apart, but instead, I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else. "Show them the account. Show them the transactions going to M. Sinclair for the last 4 years, $50,000 a month, for rent, groceries, school supplies." Brandon opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "That's not," he finally managed. "Ashley, you don't understand." "Then explain it to me," I said. "Explain it to everyone. Who is M. Sinclair, Brandon?" My mother stood up. I could see her processing. The wedding that wasn't happening, the dress, the 250 guests, the deposit on the reception that wasn't refundable. But more than that, I could see her processing the betrayal. She'd liked Brandon. She'd trusted him with her daughter. Brandon's mother, Linda, was crying. His father looked like he wanted to strangle someone, probably Brandon. "There's someone here who can answer that," I said. I'd coordinated this with Derek during the drive to the church. He'd made a phone call. I'd given him an address. "Karen?" Karen stood up from where she'd been sitting in the second pew. My best friend since freshman year at Northwestern, dressed in a bridesmaid dress that now felt ironic. She walked to the back of the church and opened the door. The woman from the coffee shop came in. She looked even more tired in person than she had in Karen's video. Her name was Michelle Sinclair. She was 46 years old. She had a daughter who was 8 and a son who was 5. She'd been Brandon's girlfriend before he met me, a relationship that had lasted for 2 years before he decided she was too serious about things and left her to pursue his law degree and his climb up the social ladder. Except he never actually left. He just started a new life on top of the old one. "Michelle," Brandon said, and his voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" "Your fiancé called me," Michelle said. She wasn't angry. That was the worst part. She was just sad. "She asked me to come. She said it was time." "You have 2 children with this woman," I said, turning back to face Brandon. The wedding dress suddenly felt like a costume, like I was wearing a lie. 2 children. You've been paying for their rent, their school, their food, for 4 years, while you were planning a future with me, while you were asking my father for permission to propose, while you were picking out monogrammed napkins and arguing about whether we wanted beef or chicken for the reception. "I was going to tell you," Brandon said. He looked like he might be sick. "After we got married, I was going to—" "You were going to what?" My voice was sharp now, cutting through the church like a knife. "Tell me you had a second family? Tell me you'd been lying to me every single day? Tell me that our entire relationship was built on a foundation of fraud." My lawyer was in the church too. I'd called her that morning, Patricia Ochoa, the best divorce attorney in Westchester County, someone who'd helped 3 of my college friends untangle their lives from men who weren't who they claimed to be. She stood up now and walked to where I was standing. "Mr. Brandon Hayes," Patricia said, addressing him formally even though we were in a church and not a courtroom. "I'm representing Ms. Ashley Chen. Effective immediately, she is suspending all wedding plans and initiating divorce proceedings. You will be hearing from my office regarding asset division, which will include the house in Scarsdale, the investment portfolio, and a significant support payment to Ms. Sinclair and her children, whom you have been supporting without your fiancé's knowledge or consent." "You can't," Brandon started. "Actually, I can," Patricia said, "and I am. Your conduct constitutes fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and misappropriation of marital assets. We have documentation of every transaction. We have video evidence of your admission to maintaining a second household. We have witnesses." I looked at my mother. She was crying now, but not the happy tears from before. These were different tears. My father had his arm around her, looking at Brandon like he'd never seen him before. "There's something else," Karen said. She was holding up her phone. "I recorded you this morning, at the coffee shop. You were holding her hand. You told her you didn't know how to end things with me, that you were trapped." Brandon's face was the color of old newspaper. His brother Derek, who'd been standing beside him as best man, stepped away from him like he might be contagious. "I want you to know something," I said, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded. "I almost married you. I almost spent the rest of my life with a man who was capable of this, a man who could look me in the eye every single day and lie, a man who could plan a future with me while actively maintaining a second family." "Ashley, please," Brandon said. "I love you. I made a mistake, a really big, stupid mistake, but—" "You didn't make a mistake," I said. "A mistake is something that happens once. You made a choice. Every single day for 4 years you made a choice. You chose to lie. You chose to deceive me. You chose to build a life that was completely false." I looked at Michelle. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not gratitude exactly, but something like understanding, something like recognition. "I'm sorry," I said to her, "for what he did to you, for what he did to your children." "I'm sorry too," Michelle said quietly. "I wish I'd been braver about telling someone sooner. I wish I hadn't let him convince me that it was better to just take the money and stay quiet." "That's not your fault," I said, and I meant it. I turned back to face the church, all 250 guests, all the people who'd come to celebrate what they thought was a love story, but was actually just a really elaborate con. "The wedding is off," I said. "My family will be sending information about the reception cancellation. Some of you will be angry about the timing. Some of you will think I should have handled this differently. But I want you to know that I'm actually the lucky one here. I found out the truth before I signed legal documents that would have tied me to this man for the next 50 years. I looked at my father. "Dad, can you walk me out of here?" He didn't hesitate. He came up to the altar, took my arm, and walked me back down the aisle while 250 people sat in stunned silence. The organist didn't play. There was no music, just the sound of my dress rustling against the wooden floor and the quiet click of my heels. Outside the church, the September sun was bright and warm. A few people had started to follow us out: my mom, my brother, some of my cousins. Karen was right behind us, still in her bridesmaid dress. "I can't believe you did that," Karen said. She sounded like she was in shock. "In front of everyone, in your wedding dress." "I can't believe I almost married him," I said, and then I started laughing. It was the kind of laugh that borders on hysteria, the kind that makes people worry you're having a breakdown. But it wasn't a breakdown. It was relief. It was rage. It was the sound of a bullet dodged. My mother caught up to us. She hugged me without saying anything. My father squeezed my shoulder. My brother just shook his head and said, "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen." The next 3 months were a legal bloodbath. Patricia was ruthless in the most professional way possible. Brandon tried to argue that the money he'd been giving Michelle was discretionary and not part of our marital assets. Patricia produced 4 years of bank statements. Brandon tried to claim that his relationship with Michelle had been purely financial and not romantic. Karen's video of them holding hands at the coffee shop made that argument difficult to sustain. The settlement was brutal. Brandon had to pay Michelle $250,000 in back support and establish a trust fund for their children's education. He had to sell his share of the partnership interest at a reduced rate to cover legal fees. The house in Scarsdale, the one we'd picked out together, the one with the wraparound porch and the perfect guest house, went to me. I sold it 6 months later and used the proceeds to pay off my student loans and buy a smaller place in the city, something that was just mine. My credit score stayed exceptional. That was the thing about being a finance professional. Even when your entire life fell apart, you knew how to protect your assets. Brandon moved to Connecticut with Michelle and her kids. They actually got married about a year after my would-be wedding. I heard about it through mutual friends. Part of me was angry about that, angry that he got to have his version of a happy ending after what he'd done. But mostly, I just felt relieved that it was no longer my problem. Dr. Reeves and I spent a lot of sessions talking about forgiveness. I don't know if I've actually forgiven Brandon. I don't think I owe him that. But I've forgiven myself for not seeing it sooner, for being so focused on the perfect life I was building that I missed the cracks in the foundation. A year later, I was having dinner with Karen at a restaurant in Manhattan when she said something that stuck with me. "You know what I think? I think that wedding dress was the most expensive costume you'll ever wear, but it was worth it, because you walked out of that church knowing exactly who you were and who you weren't marrying." She was right. I dodged a bullet. I'd caught my would-be husband in an act of deception so profound that it would have destroyed me if I'd found out 5 years into a marriage instead of 5 minutes before one. I'd exposed a lie in front of everyone who mattered to me, and I'd done it in the most spectacular way possible. And I looked absolutely incredible while doing it.